The price of food is rising, and oftentimes it can feel like we can do little about that. If you eat meat, however, there is a way for you to save money that most people don't take advantage of. If you invest in the specific tools and in learning the skills I'm about to share with you, you can seriously level up your food experience while saving money. Ready to become a more competent cook? Let's go. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Jonathan. I'm a wildlife ecology professor sharing learning experiences in wild and whole foods. So the cost of food continues to rise, and there aren't a lot of opportunities for you to save money at the grocery store. Buying whole, however, is one of those ways to dramatically reduce the cost of food. When we pay for pork chops and ground beef, part of what we're paying for is the expertise and tools that go into making those whole cuts into those specific cuts that we want. But we don't always have to pay for that labor and those skills. We can actually develop those at home and pass that savings onto ourselves. So in today's video, I want to show you how to make ground pork from a whole cut and how to break down an entire chicken that will unlock a wide variety of meals and foods that you may not have thought about and build skills in the kitchen that will be long-lasting. First, I want to talk about gear. Then, we're going to move on to talking about the whole cut of meat for making ground and what kind of whole chicken you're going to be looking for in the grocery store. I'll then walk you through the process of breaking both of these whole cuts down and then end with talking about the savings that you can expect when you do this process at home. Let's get to work. The gear that you're going to need to break down whole cuts at home starts with 4 essential pieces of kit. First, a knife. Second, cutting surface. Third, a vacuum sealer to store your broken down cuts. And for making ground, you're going to need a grinder. I talk about these basic tools in the series, The Do Everything Kitchen, so if you haven't checked out those videos, make sure you do so. Hey folks, I just wanted to take a break and let you know that one of the best ways to get the most out of the content on this channel is to subscribe to my newsletter. Every Sunday, I give you more depth and insight into the topics I cover on Out There JCH, including thoughts and perspectives that I don't really share on this platform. The newsletter is free to sign up, and as an incentive to becoming a subscriber, I'm offering a free wild food resource guide that will help make you a more capable harvester and home cook. Just click the link in the description to sign up. Okay, let's get back to the episode. The most important all-purpose tool in any person's kitchen is a chef's knife. Now, you can do all of the things I'm talking about with this one knife, and I recommend the 8-inch Victorinox stainless steel chef's knife. But if you want to get a little bit more fancy with it and maybe make some more challenging cuts, you're also going to want to pick up a boning knife. I like to use the 6-inch Victorinox semi-stiff blade to help work around some of the bones that you're going to encounter in breaking down whole cuts in a whole animal. The second piece of equipment you're going to need is a cutting surface. Now, for meats, I like to use a large plastic cutting board. The bigger the cutting board, the better, because you're going to be working with large portions of an animal and you want to have space and organize your work surface. The next piece of equipment you're going to need is a vacuum sealer for storing all of the broken down pieces of meat that you're going to have when you do your butchery at home. I recommend the Nesco vacuum sealer. It is by far the best entry-level vacuum sealer that I've ever used. Now, to make ground meat, whether or not it's for burger or for making sausage, I recommend getting a metal grinder. Now, you can buy a standalone unit, which is a little bit more expensive, and I would only recommend to purchase this type of grinder if you know that making ground meat at home is going to be something that you do on a pretty regular basis. But if you have a KitchenAid stand mixer, then you can buy all sorts of attachments to get specific types of kitchen jobs done. Now, KitchenAid and other brands sell plastic grinders, and I would stay away from these, primarily because metal is more durable and reliable than plastic. Okay, so those are the pieces of gear that you're going to need to break down these whole cuts. Now let's talk about what you need to buy at the grocery store to break things down. When making ground pork at home, the cut of meat that you're looking for is the pork butt. Now, this isn't the backside of the pig, but actually a portion of the shoulder that includes part of the scapula. This cut of meat is great because it's very muscular, but also contains a fair amount of fat and connective tissue that, when broken down and cooked, gives the meat meat, a smooth texture, and a more flavorful taste. The size of the pork butt can vary depending on the size of the pig and the cut that the butcher might provide, but anywhere from 5 to 10 pounds is a good size to make ground meat. You can expect to lose about 4 to 10 ounces to the bone that's in the pork butt, but that's okay because you can save that bone to make broth. I would avoid buying a pork butt that's had the bone removed because you're going to pay for that labor for the butcher to take it out.
To get things started, I like to cut away the portion of the butt that doesn't have the bone in it. Trimming the bone out yourself takes a bit of time, but it's definitely worth the cost savings. I like to weigh the bone here so I can get an idea of how much meat I'm going to have for my ground. The rest of this process is just cutting meat. I like to cut the butt into 1.5 inch cubes for the grinder. Now, you might have noticed that I didn't add any fat to this pork butt. And the reason for that is because pork butts usually have a nice fat to muscle ratio. Truly, making ground pork at home couldn't be simpler. The last step in this process is to weigh out your ground pork. So if you don't already have a kitchen scale, this is one important piece of equipment that you're going to need. By grinding this 8.5 pounds of pork at home, I saved myself roughly $15. I like to package all of my ground flat to make it easier to store and easier to thaw.
Now, for the chicken, you really just have to find an entire bird in your butcher section. They come in lots of different varieties, and if you're interested in saving the heart, liver, and gizzard, you can buy a whole chicken that includes the giblets. Oftentimes, these packaged whole chickens also include the neck, which is another great cut for making stock.
I like to start the butchering process by trimming off the wingtips of the chicken, which I save for making stock. I then move on to removing the flats by dislocating the joint and cutting between the bones. Want to feel for the pop, and then cutting through the joint is pretty easy. Next, I move on to removing the entire lower leg intact. Once you've cut through the skin, you want to dislocate the femur from the pelvis and then cut through the skin and meat along that pelvis bone all the way to the back of the bird. Separating the upper and lower leg from each other is simply a matter of squeezing the two long bones together and using your knife to cut through the joints. Now, personally, I like to debone my chicken thighs when cutting up a whole chicken rather than leaving the bone in, but this can be up to you. As you can see here, I'm removing the femur from the thigh and then putting it in my bag for stock. Removing the breasts from the carcass of the chicken can be a little bit tricky, and I find that it's easier when you remove the wishbone from the carcass. So you want to take your time and use the edge of your knife to feel for the bone as you're making cuts upward towards the keel. Because chicken breast skin sits loosely on the muscle, I prefer to cut it in half so that it makes cutting through the breast muscle a lot easier and less dangerous. This particular chicken had a fair amount of bleeding in its breast meat, So I ended up discarding a good portion of this because blood in meat doesn't really make for good eats. Once you cut one breast away from the keel, you simply trim down along the rib cage towards the backbone of the chicken. Here's the chicken tender, the most expensive cut of chicken. Now the only thing holding the breast and the drumette to the rest of the bird is a ligament that you can easily cut through with your knife.
Well, there you go. Not too bad, right? So now let's talk savings. The amount of money that you're going to save making ground meat at home is going to be moderate, and the reason why is because, as you've just seen, it's not that hard to break down a cut of meat and turn it into ground meat. Nevertheless, you can expect to save about 10 to 20% on your ground by doing it at home. One other benefit to making ground meat at home is your ability to control the amount of fat that goes into your ground meat. At the grocery store, you're limited to essentially two categories of meat to fat ratio: 90% muscle to 10% fat, or 80% or 85% muscle to 20 or 15% fat. Depending on the type of meal that you'd like to make and how adventurous you are in experimenting with these different meat to fat ratios, you're limited by what the butchers at the grocery store gives you. So the control that you get over your food, what specifically you're going to make, and how you tailor that to your tastes is one big reason why you want to take control of making these foods at home, rather than depending on the limited number of options that you have at the grocery store. Now, the savings you get from buying a whole chicken and breaking it down are much more considerable. You can expect to save up to 50% on the specific cuts of chicken, and similar to buying a whole cut of meat that has the bones included, you can debone your chicken, use the chicken carcass, the neck, and maybe even the giblets if you like to make copious amounts of chicken stock. And let me tell you, the chicken stock that you make at home is way better than the store-bought chicken stock. Maybe I should do an episode on that. Thanks so much for watching. If you're looking for more in-depth details and explanations of the tools that you can use in your kitchen, check out this series, The Do Everything Kitchen, where I go over all of the essential materials that you need to make these sorts of things happen. And if you're looking to see how you can put these specific butchery skills to work at home, check out this video, where I break down an entire white-tailed deer that can give you an idea of what it takes to do this work at home. It's a lot of fun. Stay tuned for my homemade chicken broth recipe video, and I'll see you next time on